Hello, you guys. Welcome back to the Riley Gaines Show. If you've watched the news, then you know that this week was really what I would call the precipice. It feels like the pinnacle of the fight of keeping men and boys out of women and girls sports. This is something that clearly I am very deeply passionate about, as it's what's really given me the platform that I now have. I'm going to spend Friday's episodes, a few minutes of Friday's episode, going into what we saw on the ground. I was there on the Supreme Court steps yesterday. So going to talk about more of that and what that looked like firsthand on Friday. Today, we're going to share the experience of a young girl who was involved in one of the two cases. There are two cases being heard, Little versus Hecox and the state of West Virginia versus BPJ. The girl we're talking to today, her name is Adala Cross. She is a high school track and field athlete in the state of West Virginia. Her involvement is in the state of West Virginia versus BPJ case. Going to talk about that, but before we do, quick note from today's sponsor. You've probably heard me talk about my friends at YRefi before, and for good reason. What they do is truly incredible. If you're someone who is struggling with private student loan debt, if even your minimum payment feels impossible, or if you're already in default, understand you are not alone. But there's good news. YRefi can help. They specialize in refinancing private student loans that most lenders won't even touch. They work with you in a one-on-one capacity to create a custom payment plan based on what you can actually afford. No cookie cutter plans, just real solutions built around you. YRefi, they can help you lower your monthly payment and reduce your total cost, all with low fixed interest rates that you won't find anywhere else. And the best part, they don't care what your credit score is. So if private student loan debt is wrecking your life or holding you back from your future, you don't have to live with that stress anymore. Go to YRefi, that is YREFY.com, and tell them that Riley Gaines sent you. Little background. I mentioned the two cases that are being heard. I want to talk today about the case West Virginia versus BPJ. Little background here. West Virginia, they were one of the first states to enact some sort of fairness in women's sports law that would ultimately prevent what has been happening in that state from happening. The ACLU, in true ACLU fashion, they're really good at this, they filed a lawsuit and ultimately sued the state of West Virginia on behalf of the boys who want to identify as girls and have access to their sports in their locker rooms. Now, Alliance Defending Freedom, they intervened in this case on behalf of female athletes. One athlete in particular, Lainey Armstead, to preserve women's sports. Now, West Virginia, with the help of ADF, they've appealed this case now to the U.S. Supreme Court. The court has now agreed to hear it. It's really a first of its kind case. I don't believe that the Supreme Court has heard a Title IX case in the capacity of sports before, so this will be a landmark case. Now, a couple key facts here. While the law was put on hold in the state of West Virginia, girls and women continued to be displaced over 700 times by one male athlete. That is 700 opportunities that women lost out on forever. That is roster spots, that is podium spots, that's spots on the team. In the state of West Virginia, there was one male athlete, BPJ, who was allowed access to the girls' locker rooms. Now, because of this decision, we've seen where young women have been sexually harassed. Now, not only was this boy given permission to play on the girls' team, he was also granted access to the girls' locker room. Now, because of this decision, young women were sexually harassed. We're talking about middle school age girls. Adala, the girl we're talking to today, honestly, she describes it as this distress. It robbed her of her passion and her love for sports altogether. She ultimately made the decision to quit track and field because of this experience. There's a Fox News article put up earlier last week with some of the comments that were alleged towards Adala from this male athlete. I was hesitant on if I should even read these because of the expletives and the profanity, but I think it's important to understand what these young girls were facing. It's alleged that this male athlete told these girls to suck his male genitalia. Not many women that I know have this male genitalia that he's telling these young girls to suck. He also told these girls, allegedly, that he is going to stick his bleep in their bleep and also in their bleep. Now, if you can't even piece together what I'm saying, that's a problem, right? And if you don't think it's a problem, then you are the problem. This is so vulgar, so heinous, so profane that I can't even bring myself to say it. That's the language that was being directed to middle school age girls, all while the adults sit idly by and do nothing. Adala and her teammates and other girls around the country are failed by so many. This always is like a finger pointing competition, right? Now, there's lots of people you can blame for this happening to Adala and her teammates. And again, girls around the country. This happened under Joe Biden's leadership or lack thereof. So you can point a finger at Joe Biden or Kamala Harris as VP. You can point a finger to congressional Democrats. You can point a finger at the school that allowed this to happen. There's a lot of people you can blame here, right? This happened under President Biden's administration. So you can point a finger at Joe Biden or his VP, Kamala Harris. You can point a finger at congressional Democrats. You can point a finger at the school or the principal for allowing this to happen. The point I'm trying to make here is that so many people and institutions failed Adala, a young girl, and now the burden is being placed on her. She is having to bear the burden of all the hate and the vitriol and the negativity that comes with using your voice so courageously and so boldly in the way that she is doing. She lost spots to compete in championship meets because of this male. And Adala isn't the only one. A few years back, I talked to 5 middle school girls in the state of West Virginia who were set to compete in shot put against the same boy. We've got a video playing on screen here. These 5 middle school girls, they were messaging me. It was so cute on Instagram. One girl in particular saying, look, me and my teammates, we don't want to compete against the boy, but we don't know what to do. I told them, look, I'm here for you no matter what you do. We kind of went through their options. They felt as if the best option was to step inside the circle, as you're seeing here on the screen, act as if they were going to throw the shot put, but ultimately step out in a way to protest the boys' inclusion on the girls' shot put team. Now, for this, the 5 young girls, you would think they would be like applauded for their bravery by the school. No, actually, the school kicked them off the team. So these young girls had to sue their school to put them back on the girls' team. What a mind-boggling situation to where the boy is entitled to the girls' team and the girls are punished for saying and protesting in a way that would highlight they believe the girls' team is only for the girls. And just a sad day when you have 13, 14-year-old girls who really have to be the adults in the room by making this decision, deciding between, playing the sport that they love or standing up for what they know to be true, righteous, just, and fair. I could not be more inspired by and proud of these girls. Today we were talking with Adala, another young girl who has had to compete against BPJ, her father, and ADF attorney Kristen Wagner. Check it out here. Well, you guys, thank you for joining the Riley Gaines Show. Adala, before we get going, I just want to acknowledge that we should not have to be here. You should not have to be talking to me right now. There are so many people and really institutions that failed you. Do you mind giving us a little background on yourself and sharing a little bit about when you first learned that a boy was going to be joining the girls' track and field team?
So hi, my name is Adala. I'm 17. I am in my junior year of high school, so my classes are pretty tough right now. But I've been doing sports my whole life. I think I started at like 2 or 3, and I've been playing an array of sports ever since. I've always enjoyed it. I love talking to people, so I love the team aspect of sports. And in 7th grade, I finally decided to stick with track. And I was throwing shot put and discus, and my 7th grade year was the male athlete's 6th grade year. He joined the team his 6th grade year, and I remember not having any idea what was going on. And the day that track was starting, I started hearing rumors that there was going to be a boy on the girls' team, and I was really confused. I hadn't really been exposed to things like that. I didn't really know even what it meant, and but no teachers were talking about it, so I just tried to ignore it and walked into the locker room, and there he was. And it was kind of really scary for me because I didn't know what was going on. And again, no adults were talking about it. So I just tried to pretend like nothing was happening. And I just tried to ignore it because I was just kind of clueless.
What about your teammates in this environment? I can't imagine that you were the only one that was kind of shaken by this. Again, this is West Virginia, a state where it's not one of the usual suspects in things like this, right? This can almost be expected, which, again, a tragedy to say, in states like California or Michigan or Minnesota or Oregon or Washington, you name the blue state. But this was happening in West Virginia. What were some of those conversations like between you and your teammates?
Yeah, definitely. We were all very confused and scared. So there were definitely whispers to each other because, again, we just had no idea what to do in that situation. And we were all just scared and too scared to say anything. So we all had expressed our discomfort to each other, but there was nothing really more than that. I remember some of the boys were very angry about it, but they also didn't have a say in it. We all just kind of were confused and just kind of stuck.
Yeah, it's a situation that you can never really fully be prepared for until it happens to you. And you mentioned the locker room, which I want to go back to that in a second, but let's talk about the competition aspect of this first. Now, this boy was allowed to compete on the girls' team. Were you ever displaced by this male athlete in a competition?
Yeah, so I was in seventh grade. He was in sixth grade and almost 2 years younger than me, so he hadn't hit puberty yet, so he was still kind of lying low. So I was throwing top three on our team and competing, and then eighth grade hit, and all of a sudden he was throwing exponentially farther by like 10 to 20 feet, and that's kind of unheard of for girls. We don't do that. We progress slowly, but towards the end of the season, I was getting ready to compete at one of our bigger meets of the year, and my coach pulled me aside and said, "Hey, you've been removed from competition." And she seemed upset about it, but she couldn't really do anything either. So I was really shocked because in my head, I had always tried to ignore it because I was still competing. Nothing had been happening in the competition aspect.
So you were directly, removed from competition because of this male athlete. And you know what? You're not the only athlete from West Virginia that I've talked to that, has a similar experience. There were several girls, I forget which high school they were from, but it was in shot put, where they said the exact same thing. They said, look, this athlete, he couldn't throw nearly as far as he was throwing just the year before. And then what you can only imagine, he's gone through puberty. He's throwing it 20, 30, 40 feet further than he was. You mentioned the locker room. I want to ask you about this. We saw an article, I saw it this week. It came out on Fox, with some comments that were allegedly said to you in this locker room setting. Honestly, Adala, they're too vulgar for me to even say out loud because I don't want YouTube to remove this from their platform. That's how vulgar these things were. Can you describe what this experience was like? Number one, sharing the locker room, but to have some of the things that were said to you, what it's like hearing those things.
Yeah. So I guess in my seventh grade year, when he was still a problem, but less of a problem because he was lying low. He was always a very aggressive person, just always yelling and saying kind of crazy things that me or my friends or really any of the girls on the team would never say, but we just kind of put up with it. And then, so we had kind of been conditioned to his aggressiveness. And then by the time eighth grade hit and he started getting worse and saying things to all of us all the time, and then eventually hitting where he was whispering these things to me, it kind of felt like dread. I had just dreaded going to practice, and I dreaded being around him because I just felt like I couldn't do anything about it. And I was still being told by these adults in my life that this was a girl and it was normal. And so I just felt really helpless and scared and frustrated and just all of the emotions all at once, which is really hard for a 14-year-old and 13-year-olds to deal with.
Of course. Now, Dad, I imagine you, like it's one thing to hear that your daughter is set to compete or practice with a boy, but it's another thing when your daughter is asked to non-consensually undress in front of a boy. When she came home and told you about the locker room scenario specifically, and some of the alleged comments that were made to her, what was the response and the thoughts that you had?
Yeah, I mean, initially when she came home, before the comments had started and we knew about them and stuff like that, we were just super confused. I mean, as you said, this is happening in West Virginia. I myself went to the same middle school, know a lot of the administrators and stuff like that. And for no one to even reach out to us at the beginning and say anything, just, pretend like that's a girl in the locker room with them at first was a really big shock to us, right? So, there's girls going to school in their practice uniforms, so they don't have to change in the locker room. It's really confusing and kind of like a helpless feeling that I had. A lot of anger and stuff. It was kind of hard to deal with and process, as her protector and provider. So that was difficult, from the start. And then just, once she came home and told us about these comments that were extremely obviously lewd that we can't say here, it's just heartbreaking. You have all these rush of emotions of anger and sadness. Everybody wants to talk about the physical kind of side of this of, getting hurt in the locker room and, all of that stuff. But I mean, also there's a mental component that comes along with this. Now my daughter's going to have to wonder for the rest of her life, is there a man in this bathroom with me? So it's just you have all these wave of emotions that were really difficult to process.
And honestly, that's what I don't think a lot of people, your critics, my critics, understand is the emotional and the mental toll that this takes, especially on young girls. I mean, we're talking about middle school age girls at this point. It's a pretty horrific thing to be in a locker room undressing, which think about a middle school girl's locker room. It's not a comfortable place in general when you're changing in front of your own sex, but to add a boy into that mix, any amount of vulnerability that you thought you had is thrown out of the window when you hear a boy's voice in that locker room. And yes, it is something that certainly takes a toll on you. Were you able to report this, what I would describe as sexual harassment? Were you able to report that to the school? And if so, what was their response?
Yeah, so I mean, immediately upon Adala telling us, what was said, we called the school, asked for an in-person meeting with the administrators. Like I said, I went to school there. I know some of the administrators, to report sexual harassment. They said they just wanted to talk on the phone, so we kind of reported everything that had been happening, named other students and coaches that had heard this type of language, maybe not specifically what she had heard, but, the other lewd comments that are being thrown around. So we reported all that with kind of full faith that, this would be kind of handled. Adala would be protected, at least given a safe space temporarily. So after we reported it, we never heard anything back. They initially called Adala into the office, told her not to tell anybody, but they were going to do an investigation. And, as far as we know, I don't know of any investigation that had happened. But, it's just, we couldn't believe that this is how it was addressed. Several months went by and no response at all, nothing.
That is crazy to me that, number one, they attempted to silence you and saying, don't tell anyone. But two, that there's even an investigation needed. I understand needing to investigate the comments. Sure, it's one person's word against another person's. But at the end of the day, again, there's a boy in the girls' locker room. What beyond knowing that fact right there is needed in an investigation to tell you that this is wrong? Now, Adala, you ultimately made the decision to walk away from the sport that you loved. And I was reading in the article, the Fox article that I alluded to, that you did this in order to protect yourself. And so can you explain this? Like, what personal cost in terms of, socially, psychologically, even your future opportunities, what personal cost is walking away from the sport that you loved? What cost did that have for you?
Yeah, so my 8th grade year, after this happened, we had a bunch of celebrations for 8th graders because it's the last year of middle school and they're moving on to high school. I did not attend any. I had no interest in going to practice, going to anything where the male athlete would be placed, and I just wanted nothing to do with it. I was ready for my freshman year because he wouldn't be there. He was still in middle school, and I had one free year without him. And all year, I kind of wrestled with whether or not to do it my sophomore year because he would be on the team with me again. And because I had to weigh in, I'm such a social person. One of my favorite parts of track was competing with my friends and just getting to talk to new people. I love meeting new people at track meets. And the thought of losing that, but also I have to protect myself. It was really hard all year, and my friends were asking about it. They didn't want me to quit, but they understood why I wanted to. They were all uncomfortable, but it was really tough all in all. So eventually I did decide to quit. I have not been back since my freshman year. And honestly, what hits me the most, other than not being with my friends and my friends talking about how they miss me on the team and they wish I would come back, is that my female friends are still changing the locker room with him. They're still enduring his aggressive comments. They're still getting their spots taken. Girls from other schools are still competing against him, getting their chances taken away from them. I know everybody there is still uncomfortable, and they're still not okay with it, and they feel like they can't do anything at all. And that's really what hurts me the most, is that all of these people are still dealing with what I had to deal with.
Which is, a lot of people can't really understand, I think, the origin of this big case that was heard earlier this week, the state of West Virginia versus BPJ, given the fact that West Virginia had a law in the books that would ultimately prevent what happened to you from happening. Kristen, can you explain the origin of this case and what it is specifically that the court will be deciding on?
Sure. Well, all the way back in 2017, we started to see boys identifying as girls starting to compete in the girls category. And lawsuits were initially filed during those seasons, and other legislators from other states began to hear about them. Both in West Virginia and in Idaho, legislators stepped up to protect the girls, and they passed laws to ensure that there would be sex-based sports, sex-based categories. West Virginia and Idaho were among the very first to do that. But BPJ, which is the male athlete that Adala is referring to, filed a lawsuit challenging the law, and there was an injunction that was entered that allowed BPJ to continue to compete on the girls' team in the middle school and to go into the locker room. I've been dying to add some commentary here from the legal side. This is the case that was heard at the Supreme Court this week. And what we know from the extensive briefing that has occurred is that BPJ didn't just displace Adala, but over 400 girls have been displaced over 1,100 times, and he has taken 57 medals during the middle school period from those girls. In addition, there were 5 girls that stood to protest and, in fact, declined to compete against BPJ to stand for their rights, to use their voice. And the school actually punished those girls. They had to file a lawsuit so that they wouldn't be punished. This is all going on in West Virginia in this case at the court. And the last thing that I think is so important about this goes to the vulgar threats that went against Adala. As a mother, to know that there was a boy in that room that is walking up behind a girl whispering, not just vulgar comments, but sexually violent threats is astonishing. And it just, in one more way, underscores why this is a bad idea, why women deserve not only equal opportunities, but safety and privacy, and what's at stake in this case. The ACLU is asking not for equal treatment, but for special treatment, and they are essentially running over the rights of women and girls in the process.
Well, of course, that's the tried and true tactics of the ACLU. To hear those numbers that you mentioned, I mean, just to repeat one back, that this one male athlete has taken 57 medals away from deserving girls. I mean, we don't see this happening the other way. Remarkable to me that there is an entire political party, and I'm pretty specifically referring to in terms of elected representation, and certainly how the media portrays it, that is on the side of the boy who, I mean, to put it in plain words, flashes himself and makes vulgar comments to young women without their consent. That is the side of who the Democrats are taking. I believe there was 130 congressional Democrats who signed on to an amicus brief supporting that male athlete in the upcoming Supreme Court review. Insane stuff. I'm not going to ask you, Kristen, to predict what the ruling will be. It should come out sometime in June or July. Is that right?
It will come out in June. We were privileged to represent female athletes, and there are actually two cases, and they were heard together, both the Idaho and the West Virginia case. And I think it's important to recognize that the Idaho case involved a collegiate athlete, male athlete. And in that case, the female athletes that we represented, they were also beaten at the collegiate level by a male athlete. And then the BPJ case involves the K through 12. And essentially the argument the ACLU is making there is that BPJ was placed on puberty blockers. And so that's different than perhaps testosterone suppressants. But again, we know from the science that is well documented in this case that even puberty blockers do not erase the physical advantages that boys have over girls because of the way that they are created, just physiologically and anatomically. And we can also just see that from what happened to Adala and to those 400 other girls.
With the makeup of the court now, I'm hopeful, I'm very optimistic that we will have a ruling in favor of young girls like Adala. But then again, we have a sitting Supreme Court justice who says she doesn't know what a woman is. We've got a clip here. Let's watch it.
Can you provide a definition for the word woman?
Can I provide a definition? No.
Yeah.
I can't.
You can't?
Not in this context.
So
I'm not a biologist.
She's not a biologist. Can we expect Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson to rule on the side of common sense, or is that just like wishful thinking?
Well, as an advocate before the court, it probably wouldn't be appropriate for me to speculate, but I think that having listened to and been in the courtroom during the oral argument, we can predict that I think that the court, it takes 9 votes. There are 9 votes that are available, and our hope is that justice will prevail for girls, and our expectation is that it will as well. We believe that both Title IX and the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution permit biological distinctions, and I think that as we heard the oral argument, the court is going to affirm that as well.
Now, Adala, I know that you know that people on both sides feel very strongly about this ongoing debate. What do you wish your critics better understood about your experience or how you feel that maybe isn't reported on accurately or even at all?
I would say that I would hope people understand that I don't want BPJ's rights taken away. I still want him to be able to compete. I still want him to have a high school experience. I just want him to do it for the boys team and to stop hurting me and other girls and taking our rights away from us and really just violating us in the process. He doesn't get to have our locker room space, as well as the boys.
Yeah, it's all the time. People will go online to call those like yourself and myself transphobic or hateful or bigoted. But I'm right there with you. The stand that you're taking, it's not one that's hateful. It's not out of a place of animosity or ill will towards any one person or specific group of people. The stand that you're taking, I know that ADF, Alliance Defending Freedom, is taking in the courtroom, that I'm taking, that your dad, it's one that is standing for something, not against anyone, any group of people. You're standing for women. You're standing for girls. You're standing for your younger siblings, your younger sister. You're standing for fairness. You're standing for reality and truth and privacy in areas of undressing and safety in your sports and beyond. The stand that you're taking is one that is very pro-woman, not anti-trans. And so last question for you, Adala. With all that you've been through the past few years now, do you believe that speaking out was worth it?
Yes, everything we've done. I would not go back and change it. It has been quite stressful for me. I've received a lot of backlash from a very small but vocal group at my school and in my community. But I wouldn't change it for anything. I just want my friends and just my fellow girls to have their rights back. And we are hoping that that's the outcome that we will get in June, I think.
And Dad, I would imagine you're very proud of Adala.
Oh, the most proud. So she's a special person. So it takes a special person to, do what's right, even when it's hard. And we've always tried to instill that in her, and she's always done that. So we're very proud of her, my mother, or her mother, and I. So she's a special person.
Well, Adala, I think you'll be in history books, and I think you'll be certainly on the right side of things. I hope it's not long before we can comprehensively, as a society, look back on this time, this weird blip of time that we're living in, where we have, people from the top down, especially in the previous administration, who are telling people that they're correct to feel as if they're born in the wrong body. We have healthcare providers who are prescribing these unnatural synthetic chemicals and hormones to children, not to mention the unregulated child butchery that we're seeing in those who are getting healthy body parts removed. I hope it's not long before we can look back and call this time what it is, which is utterly insane, deeply misogynistic, and insanely regressive. They love to use the word progressive, right? Indicating that we are moving in the positive forward direction. But what happened to you, Adala, what continues to happen to girls around the country, it's taking us back in time. More than half a century at this point, before women had rights to compete fairly in their sports and beyond. So thank you for using your voice so boldly and so bravely. You're a role model to me, and I know you're a role model to so many people who are watching and listening today. So I admire you and excited for a hopefully great outcome in June.